So what if we told you there are specific types of conversations that will open up the doors to more trust and vulnerability between you and your spouse? So in this video, we're going to be sharing with you some must-have talks to have with your spouse that will begin restoring the trust, making space for a deeper emotional intimacy and for a better connection. And what if I told you this? The conversations you neglect to have with your spouse is the bond you neglect to build. So throughout the end of this, right, we want you to start having these conversations so you can build that bond, more friendship, more intimacy, more vulnerability, and more trust within your relationship.
That's right. Let's get into it. All right. So today we're talking about 3 different conversations to build that trust and vulnerability. Now, this first type of conversation is really about getting you both on the same page, okay? Especially if you've been married maybe 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years and you feel like you're just living completely separate lives in the same house, all right? So we want to get you on the same page. 9 times out of 10, if that's you, you're likely experiencing some things in your relationship. You've experienced some things in the past. And there are some things that are, you maybe have been holding on to, some things that you've been suppressing, or maybe your spouse has been suppressing. And so we're going to talk about that in this first conversation. All right. So here's the thing. Most couples avoid talking about this because of where they are in their relationship. So you may be in a place where you don't really have very touchy conversations. You may be in a place where, you have a terrible day at work, or you have a terrible week at work, and you don't feel that space. You don't feel secure, safe enough with your spouse to talk to them about it. Right. And so what we want to do is cultivate trust and vulnerability, because that is what's going to separate your relationship with your spouse from everyone else.
And one way to do that, right, is to get uncomfortable so you can get comfortable with each other. So when we say get uncomfortable, like some of these conversations are going to be uncomfortable, right? Yeah. But once you have it, you're going to feel a better comfort level within your household, within your environment of your relationship, because you started talking about these things that you've been neglecting. So the first type of conversation is the most pressing thing. Talking about the most pressing thing, not 50 things, just pick one of the most pressing thing that you want to talk about with your spouse. Because what happens is, and we've been there before, a lot of times, like I would have had something on my mind, or, something I've been, wanting to have a conversation about, and I'll just be neglecting it because it wasn't comfortable, because of everything that's going on in our relationship. Mm-hmm. And what happened was, in the midst of an argument or in the midst of frustration, then that pressing thing will come out and you wouldn't receive it. No. Because first of all, I didn't communicate it properly. Mm-hmm. Then I communicated with frustration and anger, more than likely. Mm-hmm. And then you wasn't at a place to receive it, because why? You're probably fed up with, you're probably, dealing with your emotions because it's a confrontation or something like that going on. Yeah. So the most pressing thing, we want you to have that conversation. And for each household, for each relationship, it's going to be different, that pressing thing. It's
going to look different. For some of you, that most pressing thing can be a conversation about what's going on with the money, right? Like spending habits and saving, your goals, your desires, things that you want to do. You may not be on the same page about that. And it may have been like that for a while. And it's like, you know what? It's time to talk about this. That could be your pressing thing. For other people, their pressing thing could be, you know what? We got to talk about this co-parent situation, because the way that you're responding is not making sense, right? And I'm not comfortable with it. For some people, it may be intimacy, right? Listen, it's been weeks. What's going on? Why haven't we connected? What's going on, right? I can't keep living in a relationship like this. And so from house to house, from relationship to relationship, it's going to look different. And so what you want to do is, make sure that you're picking a time to talk about this. And that's why we assign this conversation as the most pressing thing, because a lot of us are walking around with suppressed thoughts, suppressed opinions, feelings, things that you may have tried to bring up before and they got dismissed or they got rejected. But 9 times out of 10, it could have been brought up at the wrong time. And so if you want to develop more trust and vulnerability, instead of tiptoeing around the issue, we're going to have to confront that thing head on, and we're going to have to talk about it. All right. So create that space. Create that space, create that time so that it comes out at the right time and you have a very organized, orderly conversation about it. Now, this next type of conversation is very critical to moving forward in the relationship, okay? You cannot move forward without talking about this, especially if you feel like you're in a neglected relationship where, you're both living separate lives in the same house. You barely talk, you rarely spend time together. In order to move forward, in order to come aligned again, you're going to have this conversation.
In this conversation right here, we call this removing the thorns and the bullets. Yes, removing the thorns and the bullets. Because a lot of times in relationships, we're walking around with thorns in our heart. Or even worse, a bullet in our heart when betrayal has been at its highest. You walk around with a bullet in your heart from your spouse, or a thorn in your heart from your spouse from different things that happen. So now it's time to start having those healing conversations from a place of understanding, from a place of, I want to resolve this issue. I want to help you. I want you to heal from this. And we call these soul healing conversations, right? Because people are walking around hurt. And when they try to talk about, past issues, sometimes they get caught up in a repetitive cycle of starting to argue, or they get stuck in the past and not move forward. So when you make the time and space to remove the thorns and bullets with the specific conversation, you're giving each other the exact time, the exact space, and you're coming ready to listen with an understanding heart and an understanding mind.
And another reason why it's so important to talk about this too is because, let's say a spouse was betrayed. Let's say a spouse was hurt by their partner. There are behaviors that the spouse can still be doing that's triggering the pain of that thorn, triggering the pain of that bullet, and they have no idea. And we're talking about 5, 10, 15 years of the same repeated behaviors, right? And so that's causing even more pain in the relationship. That's causing even more pain for one particular spouse. It could be both, right? And so what we want to do is we want to remove those thorns. We want to remove those bullets, and we want to just talk about them. Yes, this conversation is going to bring up things, and it's going to bring up past. It's going to bring up pain, but we got to deal with the past in order to move forward. And so conversation number 2, removing the thorns and bullets, is crucial. And here is a word by word. If you've tried to have this conversation before, okay, you're like, Tazadaq Zakah, no, we've tried to talk about this before. It may not have went the way that you wanted. And so here's a word by word kind of script or question you can ask your spouse, or you can ask each other to have an equal exchange in this conversation. Okay. And so that question is, what past experiences or experience in our relationship together do you believe has pulled you further away from me? What past experiences in our relationship has pulled you further away from me? Now, prepare yourself when you ask this question.
Yes, prepare yourself, because what's going to come out your spouse's mouth is going to be directed towards you. And we want you to come from a place of, like I said before, of understanding with an open heart. Not come from a place of you have to defend yourself, or you got to go, you got to get in defense mode. No. Act like a podcast host. When a podcast host is interviewing somebody, they're asking a question, they're listening, then they're asking clarifying questions to make sure they actually understand their guest. So this conversation, ask those clarifying questions so you can actually get to the root cause of that pain, that hurt, so you can remove that thorn, remove that bullet, and be healed and continue to move forward in your relationship.
And we actually created a guide that gives you the exact word for word questions to ask each other when having these conversations. Okay. It is called the Connection Provoking Conversations video guide. You can find the link down below in the show notes. It's a 5-day video guide for married couples to break the ice, really face their issues, and get emotionally naked. Okay. It's a 5-day guide. It's going to give you questions for 5 days. You can do it over 5 days. You could do it over 5 weeks. We recommend taking your time with it though, because the stuff that's going to come up can get very uncomfortable. Okay. Everyone's in a different place in their relationship. And so for some people, they may be able to do it over 5 days, but for others, it may take a little bit longer. So take your time when you do that.
And it's a free guide, so go ahead and click it in the description box somewhere below here. All right. So with that being said, let's get into the next type of conversation. Now, this right here is one of the most exposing and uncomfortable conversation. But by the time you get here, you've already done a lot of the unrobing. We're talking about unrobing. You've already gotten, emotionally naked. You already opened up about certain things in your relationship. So before initiating this conversation in our relationship, we experienced a lot of rejection, a lot of defensiveness, and it was a lot of self-protection. Like, I got to protect myself from you because I don't want to be exposed. You had to protect yourself from me. Yeah. And it was a lot of combativeness before we had this specific conversation.
Yeah. And once we started having these conversations frequently, more and more and more and more, it not only changed the way that we responded to each other in our own relationship, but it started changing the way that we respond to other relationships with other people and the way that we just respond to life. Okay, so this conversation type number 3, get ready to get uncomfortable. Okay, it is called show your hand. All right, show your hand. This one is really about being in a self-reflective state and getting ready to own your contribution to the relationship. Okay. Some people's contribution could be, you know what? I've contributed to this relationship by being a little bit too negative, by giving a little bit too much feedback, by doing this or doing that, or not, apologizing when it was needed, or XYZ. For other people, some people may feel like, well, you know what? I didn't do anything. That's also a contribution. I just sat back, and since you didn't respond to me, I'm not responding to you. You're not looking for me, I'm not looking for you. That fallback, that's also a contribution. And so it can go both ways. And here's, at the end of the day, either of those contributions are off because it's not contributing to the growth of the relationship. And so conversation type number 3 is showing your hand. What have you contributed? And we're not talking about, I've done this, I've done that, and now we're keeping points. I did all these things and you haven't done anything.
Yeah, no, this is
right?
This is not the point of this conversation right now. Right now is the time just to own up to your L's, to your losses, to the things that you neglected to do, or the things that was off, the things that you did in the relationship that was off.
Right.
And it's okay. Like, I can relate to it. We can relate. We've had to lean in and learn from the lessons of our losses. So we say that to you. Right now is a place for you to lean in and learn from the lessons from your losses. And what that does is it puts you in a self-reflective state so you can be exposed.
Yeah.
When there's exposure, that means light is shown. When light is shown, what happens? Now it's a place for you to grow. It's a place for you to move forward. It's a place for things to change for the better, for the best in your relationship, if you're prepared once you expose yourself to change and move forward.
Yeah. When we think about the Most High God, He really created us to be continuously growing, continuously expanding, continuously changing. And so this conversation is going to make a whole lot of room for that. And it's not easy being exposed, right? I remember so many times where it was like, I just kind of let you tell me about myself and you let me tell you about yourself. And at first it felt really, really uncomfortable, but doing that more and more and more and more, it's like, this is the safe space now, right? Like, everything outside is outside, but this is now the safe space because we've allowed each other to see each other's flaws and we've allowed growth. And so if that's what you want for your marriage, if you want more trust, you want more vulnerability, you're going to have to get ready to get vulnerable.
And if you tried having these kind of conversations before and it went southwest like the airlines, don't worry, we got you. Download our free video guide in the show notes or in the description, and we're going to walk you through these 3 conversations plus 2 more in our 5-day video training.
And so these trainings are a word-for-word script to have with your spouse, the exact questions to ask so that your conversations stay on the right track and remain headed in the right direction. So we're not talking about a million things. We're focused on one thing at a time, okay? And those questions aren't gonna come off like you have an agenda or like you wanna get your point across or, anything biased or one-sided. These are it's really structured so that you have these 2-way conversations and it feels equal and balanced for both yourself and for your spouse. So you can look in the show notes, download that 5-day video guide.
And if you found this video helpful, let us know in the comments, and also share this video out to one couple that you'd like to see win this year. With that being said, peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.